Hi, everyone. The use of data by schools has changed dramatically in recent years. Decades ago, data may have been reduced to the daily attendance reports and annual reports from tests such as the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. Now, however, technology solutions exist for nearly every aspect of education, ranging from staff development and wellness to student attendance and achievement. The benefit of this expansion of data is potentially better decision-making and teaching. The challenge, though, is reining in and making sense of all the data that are available for a particular school. That will be our topic of discussion on today's Teaching Matters.
Welcome to Teaching Matters, a podcast exploring all things teaching and learning. Teaching Matters is produced by NPR affiliate WOUB Public Media in Athens, Ohio. And here is your host, Dr. Scott Titsworth, Dean of the Scripps College of Communication at Ohio University.
Thank you, Trinity. Two guests are joining us today on Teaching Matters. Zach Vanderveen is a former history teacher and director of technology and administrator. Now he's the co-founder and chief innovation officer at Abre, a data-driven technology solution for schools. Also joining us is Chris Rose. He is the other co-founder of Abre. He is currently the chief product officer. Prior to that, in this role, Chris was a math teacher. Gentlemen, thank you both for being on and talking about Abre today.
Thank you so much, Scott. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. Really excited to be here. Thank you, Scott.
So I'd like to start just by getting to know the two of you. Can you kind of talk about your backgrounds in education and maybe what led you to want to get into sort of this educational technology space? Zach, why don't we start with you and then we'll go to Chris.
Yeah. So I started my teaching career in inner city Houston. Started teaching Texas history. And when I started, this is kind of a fun little quick story, but we had Hurricane Katrina come through New Orleans, and then promptly thereafter, Hurricane Rita through Houston, which shut down school. It was like a weird southern version of a snow week where no students. And so I picked up a book and started coding or learning how to code to really start to address, I think, the core things that I was facing in my team. And it really got the bug. Combine that with the massive level of engagement I was getting from my students. This would have been late 90s, early aughts with the early versions of the LMSs out there. Mm-hmm. I can still remember very much hopping into a discussion with my students about after they had been reading the Journal of Christopher Columbus, they were debating it. Well, they were debating it at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. And I just remember thinking, there's something to this. I need to figure this out. So the joy and creativity of starting in an area that I love. I love being a teacher. I love being an administrator. I'm very passionate about students and making their learning opportunities really shine. But it sort of started to blend into how do we think about making the work that all these wonderful educators are committed to easier and better? And that really started to draw me towards looking at the capabilities and what you could do via the technology. And I think that's where that seed really got was planted. And then you also get the positive feedback loop that happens. You get curious, you start to code, you show people. People are like, that's cool. You want to do it over here? And you're like, over here. And next thing you know, you're sort of climbing the administrative ladder of put that dude on it. That's how you see a lot of that happening. So so that's kind of how the origins of it were for me.
Mm-hmm. Chris, what about you?
Yeah, for me, so I grew up in a household where my mom was a 35-year educator and my dad was a CTO. And so growing up, I had this passion in my DNA and my roots for education, but had this also passion for technology. And I would observe my dad programming and building software for a paper company that he worked for. And so when I was growing up, I was observing my mom as a fifth grade teacher. And technology was very limited at that time. They had just gone to an online grade book. That was the first thing that they did in the school district she worked for. And then I decided I was going to go into computer science and programming, but I actually decided to go into education as a career. So in 2011, I started teaching, but having that freelance background of programming experience, that is where I started to say, okay, how can I apply my experience doing freelance programming and design and the passion of development that I did in middle school and high school and applying that to my teaching career in the school district. And so, as every teacher, first year teacher finds out, they're trying to navigate classroom management. They're trying to figure out student learning objectives. They're trying to figure out evaluations. They're trying to do all these things. So that led me to start to build and develop software that would selfishly make my life easier, but then also help the district be more efficient and use data. And we'll get into more of the Abre story, but that's really how I got into technology and education.
When I was doing research to learn a little bit about the two of you, there's a statement that just stood out on the Abre website that says there's a funny story about how you met. So I'm curious, how did you meet?
I'll let Zach tell that story.
Oh, I love this story. It's hilarious. Look, I think much of life is encountering really awesome people, and it's serendipity, I think, a lot of times. So for Chris, I took the initial tech director position at Hamilton where we started Abre, and I'm getting to know folks. So I get invited over to one of the gentlemen who worked for us, and he's like, "I'm going to invite a bunch of people over. You get to meet them." So I go over there, and it's great. I'm getting to meet people, and Chris walks in the door with his fiance at the time. And his name's Rex. He walks up and he goes, so this is Chris, and he tried to get your job, but he didn't get it. You got it instead. Have fun, and then just walked away. And the first time I'm meeting Chris, and he's just kind of like, we don't know each other from Adam, and typical Chris, I know him now because we've been doing this journey for so many years. He's kind of shrugs and does things. He's just like, I just didn't want them to hire an idiot. Just kind of a matter of fact.
Exactly. And that's part of the story is we didn't have a director of technology at the time, and Zach can get into this story if it makes sense, but there were very few individuals in the state of Ohio that both had a budget and had a CTO title. And so instruction and technology, the intersection of that was a foreign concept then. And so I think having someone that was leading the direction of technology really around the concept of instruction, we needed that as a district. And I had seen so many districts not do that. I'd either seen them hire technology for technology's sake, or I had seen them hire an educator that didn't have experience in technology.
Yeah.
And so, I did apply for the job. That was a funny, but so glad that Zach ended up joining the team and getting that position, because that set us up for the success, that we ended up having.
Now, so the two of you worked at Hamilton for a number of years together.
We did.
My recollection is that Hamilton is sort of on the northeast side of the greater Cincinnati area. Am I right about that?
Northwest side.
Okay, yeah. And
Yep.
so talk a little bit about, what the district was like then when, this role got created, and how technology in that district sort of started to expand. And I assume somewhere in there is the origin story of Abre.
Yeah, very much. So this is back at the time when districts are really starting to ramp up with putting Chromebooks in front of folks, right? Mm-hmm. We reached that point where it was fiscally and financially possible to start putting these in the hands of every student, which then leads to the next question. Well, what do they do with these? So I think, coming into that district, as Chris was saying, it was a new position which uniquely afforded me to, coming from an academic background, understand the needs and by that point, I'd done a lot of instruction with students on how to use, online learning, et cetera, but also having the fiscal resources and then being able to build a particular team. And I think what quickly emerged, Scott, was while we were getting these Chromebooks and there's all these software solutions out there, what we were running into and what I was running into was the mess of it, meaning everything was scattered everywhere. Like I'm writing POs to all kinds of different software companies, and I'm sending my folks, 50 million different places to find this. And it was exceptionally frustrating for me, and it was exceptionally frustrating for, all my coworkers and teams and teachers and the students themselves. So, the follow-up to the story about meeting Chris was, at the time, it was very fascinating the first time I met him, because Hamilton had a beautiful website. And school websites are usually not, you don't usually use the word beautiful to describe them. And I made that comment to Chris, and Chris was like, well, I did that. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I coded my own content management system using this, and this authentication in the background, et cetera, et cetera. And you have this moment where I knew what that meant. I was like, what do you do? And he's like, I'm a math teacher. I'm like, oh, there are so many cool ideas we could be doing. So I think part of that setup then was, this is a good kind of a transition. Like, it was a district, I love it. It was a district, high, free and reduced lunch, 10,000 students. To a degree, I think those kind of districts are more open to innovation because what do you got to lose, right? Go for it. So went to the board and said, look, Chris and I have this idea. We'd like to take him out of the classroom and start moving in the direction of trying to solve this problem of having a mess of everything everywhere. And I think it's going to produce results. I also think it's going to save the district a boatload of cash. Will you invest in this idea? And to their credit, the board's like, yeah, let's try it. I don't know if, Chris, if you had anything you wanted to add to that story.
That's spot on. And I think when Zach and I sat down, we just started to really think about, as Zach mentioned, with the Chromebook era, or this one-to-one device era, what is the user experience? And I think where Zach and I are both philosophically aligned on, it has to be simple for it to be used. Many times less is more. And not only were we buying at the time, it seemed a lot of software. Now I couldn't have even imagined, fast forward to 2026, my perspective, the problem's gotten worse. Yeah. We've continued in education to buy more and more and more and more. And that has created a snowball effect, even more complexity around things. But, we were buying a lot of software. And, to Zach's point, I remember speaking with some family members, parents of students that I taught as a math teacher, and they would just say, look, we're not going to do any of it because we're not going to log into an LMS, to go to a single sign-on service, to go to a newsletter, to go to a Google Doc, to go to a report card. It's too complicated. Mm-hmm. And so to me, it was, trying to say, what does this new wave of technology look like? It's a single source of truth that is easy and accessible. That's probably not a learning management system. That's probably not a student information system. It's something much more broad for all stakeholders, not just teachers. And so that was a very cool time. Zach and I sat down with a whiteboard and we just basically said, okay, we have this device. What is the software that needs to fuel the potential of that device?
So sort of turning then to, how Abre evolved, was created and evolved. As I've been learning about it on your website, it looks to me like this is sort of an umbrella platform that encompasses things. Is that a fair analogy? Is that the way you would describe it, or how would you explain to somebody that's new to your platform what it does, how it functions, and,
Sure.
and how it makes sense of things for people?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this first. So, I think picking up on the story that we just shared, which is, where do you start your day as a user? And we said, start your day with Abre. Mm-hmm. So as Zach mentioned, we had 10,000 students. Where do they go? What's their homepage? Where do they start their day? Well, we were already a Google school. We used Chromebooks. So, we set the homepage to be Abre. Well, because we built in Google authentication from day one, we're not creating accounts for students. Mm-hmm. They open up their Chromebook, they're already signed in to Abre, and they're seeing exactly what their day unfolds to. So they might see things like grades, they might see things like announcements for their school, shortcuts that would provide them easy access to their instructional tools without having to find them. But more, as Abre's evolved, that is, of course, their data as well. Are they, how's their attendance? I know the state of Ohio, students have to be on at high school a graduation plan. How's their graduation plan? How are they doing academically with state tests and behavior and wellness? Now there's things like wellness check-ins that the school can do of how students feeling each day. So, I say all that because Abre was first and foremost designed to be the place where, as an educator, as a teacher, as an administrator, as a student, as a parent, you can start your day in Abre. And that obviously has a lot of data that's needed in order to provide that experience. So when we enter a school district today, we don't ever recommend, oh, go adopt our MTSS solution, go adopt our assessment solution, go adopt our communicate. It's too much change management for 1 year. They're already buying probably hundreds of these software tools. So essentially what we try to do is come in and say, let us give you back value of those tools by consolidating that data under data and analytics first. So on our website, you'll see that's our primary solution is around data and analytics. That's pulling in data from all the tools they have, providing that experience. And then over time, what we find is they will recognize gaps within software tool that they have. So maybe they don't have an MTSS tool or an assessments tool, and they start to upgrade and add on to Abre. I often talk about or think about the analogy of a smartphone. I buy a smartphone, I add on an app. That's a different concept than, oh, I bought a flip phone and I need to go buy another flip phone and buy another flip phone. And so think about Abre as getting all that data in one spot to make it meaningful, but then adding on additional functionality, we call them solutions, over time that add value to that experience.
Sticking, I guess, Zach, is there anything you want to add to that before I ask another question?
No, I think I like your analogy as sort of an umbrella. I like Chris clarifying a little bit. It's more of a journey to opening up the umbrella. Is probably is how that analogy that I would describe it.
Yeah, very good. So sticking with the idea of how different stakeholders would start their day with this, what about the teacher side of things? So if I'm a teacher in a district that's using this, how does my day look when I open up, my laptop and go to Abre?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it depends on what the school district's adopted, right? So back to that umbrella, if they've started with data, we really try to make it very, very simple for the educator. So very, very self-serving to me as the classroom teacher, because I was, again, as that math teacher, working towards what students were showing growth in math. Are there standards that the student is struggling with? Who were the students absent the day before that I need to follow up with? How am I communicating that academic progress to parents? Did the student take a benchmark assessment like a MAP or iReady, and how are they doing, and how does that impact my my differentiation and instructional practices in my classroom? All of those things seem kind of common sense as a teacher, but very, very time consuming to get. I mean, dealing with spreadsheets and downloading things or going to different tools to get that data. So, as an educator, that might require me to go to a grade book and an assessment tool and a benchmark tool and an attendance tool and all of that. So for Abre, when you log in as a teacher, of course, you're seeing those things. You're seeing announcements and communications that are targeted to you, maybe put out by the district or by your building, but you're able to see all your students. So you don't have to, add all your students. We sync up with the student information system, and we synchronize that data from the tools that the district's already buying. So, that map data, that attendance data, that benchmarking data is already flowing into Abre. And we paint a picture. One of those pictures is called the Class 360. So if I'm looking across my class or across my students, what students do I need to focus on and why? And the part that makes me the most excited is not just understanding the now, though that saves a lot of time. It's now after I start doing these things in my classroom, am I seeing improvement? After I'm acting, now I'm evaluating and saying, okay, well, what I did in that actually did improve that in the next benchmarking period, et cetera.
Zach, as you think about the evolution so far, I mean, part of your role, it appears in the company, is to think about the future. How has AI started to play a role in platforms like this, especially surrounding how data get interpreted and meaningful insight derived from it?
Yeah, I love this question, and I think it is the core question that many schools are wrestling with, and certainly businesses that serve schools are wrestling with. This might be an oversimplification, but the way I see this emerging a bit is you have AI that's tied to generative AI. So, this is where I think the biggest growth has been happening in the ed tech sector. That's been things like using AI to generate lesson plans or emails or announcements and those kind of, and that's fine. We have those elements really built into our platform. We tend to look at that as a little bit more of low-hanging fruit, though. Where we're more intrigued in thinking about it is in terms of getting access and understanding your data quickly, efficiently, and then even to a degree displaying the data in ways that become useful for you to have conversations with boards of educations or your community. So for us, what that means in our platform, we've really been focusing on something called AI Insights, which allows district leaders or folks in the district to go in and basically start having conversations with their data. You can start saying things like, I'll give you a case. Like, this is one that happens pretty frequently to superintendents. You have a conversation with the board, and the board wants to know things like, well, how's behavior been doing over at the high school? And in real time, the superintendent can open up Abre and start saying, okay, and ask it, how is behavior doing at the high school? Now, you might need to refine that, how he's asking those questions, but in real time, he's getting answers back. And you can even do things like start asking questions like, well, I have all this behavior data. What are some good questions for me to ask? Mm-hmm. How should I understand? Like, and you can start to think about it in terms of like, well, we've started to notice, like, you might start to think like, if you have attendance rates go up by 3%, you might start to then pop over to behavior and correlate that time together to start thinking about, hey, it has this impact or it doesn't have this impact. So for us as a company, I mean, there are just so many uses for AI. I think for us, because we are such a data-focused platform, the central approach that we're doing is thinking about how do you actually go about servicing trends, understanding what's going on, really, and again, I want to emphasize fast, because that example I gave about the superintendent, how was he doing that before? Well, he'd call up the back office, they would go scramble, do an export out of the student information system, they'd then go clean up a spreadsheet, and then maybe at best a couple days later he'd have his answers, versus he flips open his phone and he has the answers in 10 seconds. Mm-hmm. That's a big win. It's a political win. It's an efficiency win. And let's just not, take away the fact that it also just helps serve kids better because you are making informed decisions.
Mm-hmm. When you were talking earlier about sort of a typical progression plan, starting with analytics and then building on other services, one of the things that I was interested about in looking at the website was the health and wellness aspect. Just talk a little bit about, that aspect of your platform and how that sort of works. And I say that in a context that I'm sure the two of you are acutely aware of. I think that health, well-being, wellness is something that is becoming incredibly important for every district right now. Higher education, we're seeing it become an issue. It's not just COVID. I think it's a generational, I don't want to call it a crisis, but I mean, I think that both for the teachers and the students, health, well-being, wellness is something that we all have to pay more attention to. So I'm just curious about how your platform sort of addresses that need.
Yeah, it's an incredible data point in addition to just helping students and giving them resources. And so what I mean by that is obviously if a student is not feeling healthy and emotionally sound, they're not going to absorb a lot of content or information or be able to even learn. And so, Abre takes a variety of approaches to this. We have partnerships with some from content assessment companies that we can actually provide a social emotional learning assessment to students that is a multi-informant. So it's asking students how they're doing and feeling. It's asking their teacher, their advisor. It's even getting some information from their parent or guardian of what's being observed at home. That is what I would call more of a formalized assessment that can be delivered directly within Abre. That's typically given like 3 or 4 times a year. But I think what I get excited the most about, not that I'm not excited about that, but we partnered with a district and actually built a workflow and software in Abre around what we call wellness check-in. And so when students, again, back to they're opening up their Chromebooks, they're going into Abre, says, how are you doing today? Mm-hmm. Are you smiley faced? Do you need help? Are you tired? Are you overwhelmed? And then it says, what at that point, what can we do? Do you want to connect to a counselor? Do you want some resources? Do you want to talk to your teacher about this? And it's an entire workflow that can be escalated, and obviously, some resources can be automatically shared, and content, we partner with some content companies that share some things that can be automatically shared to the student. But then also just letting the teacher and the counselor, the guidance counselor know, hey, the student's, said 3 days in a row that they're overwhelmed and tired. How about you, touch base with them, and an entire workflow can be facilitated there. And so all of that's pretty incredible, because we're, the students that would not go out and proactively go down to the office or have that conversation, those students can be found. But in addition to that, you can start to see that correlation, I think, between how those emoji, or how they're doing and how they're feeling over time at a building level, at a teacher level, at a cohort level. And how does that relate to things like attendance or behavior, et cetera? There's, having all of that data is allowing you to see impacts of different variables.
Are there, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we have some customers, Scott, who actually use wellness check-in as one of the variables for their early warning system. And what I mean by that is they actually, when do you intervene with kids? The MTSS process, tier 3 interventions, which can be behavior related as well, but they'll combine it with a combination of attendance, wellness check-in, grades, and behavior. And the beauty of it then is, from a teacher's perspective, or for principals, or even from a superintendent, is they pull it up and instantaneously they're sort of seeing the flavors of, like, here are the kids that we need to be directing our attention to, or here are the kids that we maybe don't have to give as much attention to in this particular area. And it helps just make that decision making happen really fast.
Yeah. Both of what you both just said answers the question I'm about to ask you very well. So let's pretend that you didn't just say all that.
Crap.
If I were being a devil's advocate, one of the concerns I might have about quote unquote yet another technology solution is a progressive dehumanization of the educational experience for students. That it's all about the student data, it's all about the information in the hard drives, et cetera, and no longer about the student themselves. Respond to that potential criticism.
It's the anti-Abre. I mean, the reason why we do this is to make more time for the human to build the relationship.
Exactly.
And I think, again, I'll go back to 2011, 2012, when I started teaching. I was spending more time before I left the classroom actually dealing with data and spreadsheets than I was building relationships and getting my kids engaged with the content. And that is where I was like, software and technology should automate this process, that is, so that the educator and the administrator have time to actually build those relationships and make that process of education more humanized. But if the human is spending their time on the data and analysis and the busy work, there is no time to build that human connection.
I think we have to get very honest about the opportunity cost of sort of the grunt work. I'm not saying that it's not important. Aspects of it are, but it's at a cost for a teacher or a principal deeply developing relationships with students, which is usually why folks get into this career in the first place. They care about kids. I don't think AI is going to automate a teacher anytime soon because of this being such a completely important aspect of it. So I really like. Chris and I kind of used to joke tongue-in-cheek of an unofficial tagline of, we help you jump through the hoops faster, of kind of like thinking about it, because, again, there are things that you have to do, state reporting, et cetera, and they're good for the foundational aspect, but if we can make those aspects go faster to give time back to the adults who are really, really making a good impact on kids, that is such an important goal and such an important win.
And one thing I would add to that too, and I think that obviously if you can create that efficiency around the data and you can present it in such a way that the teacher or the administrator or the parent really understands, hey, over time, does that intervention or do those actions for that student equate to an improved outcome? I just think that, again, you're giving that educator data more efficiently, that they can spend time being a human, but then it's making them a better educator. So It's sort of this snowball effect, because now they're seeing like, okay, if I'm not having to put in the legwork to collect and analyze all this data, that can be presented. I can spend the time doing and building those connections. So now I can see the impact I'm having, and many teachers are having impact. And I think what's disheartening is if they don't see that with the data. And so when you start showing them, like, hey, because you did this, you had that impact, they're like, love
Scott,
it, right?
can I give like a quick little anecdote here? Too,
Absolutely, yeah.
From not so much from a certainly we've been talking from a teacher perspective. Let's talk about from a parent's perspective for a second. And this is true. This has happened. So one of our customers is an assistant superintendent, and her daughter attended another customer school district that did this wellness check-in that Chris was describing right there. And it was lovely because she pulls me over because I'm visiting her house. She's like, hey, can I have a quick conversation with you? Yeah. So she pops open her phone. She pulls open her student from the Student 360 from Abre, and she's getting these results. And she's like, so these results that I'm seeing coming in from my child, from the teacher, from these other various sources, they don't necessarily mesh up with what I'm seeing at home. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? She's like, so what I'm trying to understand here is, how do I have this conversation with my child at home at the dinner table about these themes that have started to emerge? Because, and I mean, she's asking it because she's a loving and caring mom and wants to grow her kid, but she had that tool and that reference to really base that conversation about actual data points that we're coming in to see. She's like, this is just amazing. It cracks me up too, because we ask our users, what are the things they like about Abre the most? And when you ask students, this particular aspect of the wellness check-in is always like, this is the best thing about this platform, because they've really heard, and then people are actually like seeing the component about or seeing the value in how to have conversations. But it's little nuggets like that come back to this consistent theme of we make it easier to have an impact, and that's what technology should be doing.
Yeah, I being in higher ed, of course, I don't work on your platform, but we have versions of early warning systems for students. And one of the things that I've observed, I've been doing this job for 15 years, and and we've really started using that sort of approach during that time period, right? So I've seen its evolution. And one of the things I observed is that going back to before we had access to data like that with students, as a teacher, there were all kinds of I'm going to call them cognitive biases that would prevent you from being able to see things that are going on, right?
Yeah.
You might know on a given day that a student hasn't shown up, but you have no other context for whether they're showing up to their other classes or, this, that, and the other thing. Now, we can integrate data that's pretty granular for a student and have that be something that my advisors can see. And, the two of you are right. They can zero in on a student very quickly that is showing signs that if they continue would likely mean that student could end up on probation or something along those lines. And I think that's a great use of time, resources, and information to try to ward that off, because it's much easier, as I'm sure you know, to prevent the student from getting into academic difficulty than it is to get them out of it, right? So.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I mean, in a public school system in K-12, it's, obviously you want students to be successful, either going to college, a career, military, what is their post-high school success plan? And, having that full picture historically of that student's data paints a pretty clear picture over time. Is a student headed to the trajectory of a post-high school success plan?
Yeah. Sort of a very practical question. When districts start to engage with Abre, what does the timetable for onboarding look like? And I guess as a part of that question, my assumption is that this is typically done at a district level rather than at a school or classroom level.
Yeah, that's correct. It is done at the district level. We've just found that to be the most pregnant, because one of the primary first steps in a relationship with us is we have to do an integration with the student information system, right? Because that's the official platform of record within a school district. Usually, there's some off reasons where it's not, but so it's a great question. And for us, we tend to think about the relationship growth with our customers in phases, really. And those phases are very much determined by what is the objective and what they're trying to do. So in general, like the first couple phases is onboarding and integrating core data sets for them. So your SIS, your third-party data assessments like your state assessment or MAP or ACT or SAT, et cetera. And really that, depending on a couple different factors, but really that can take anywhere from a couple weeks to maybe 6 weeks at most. That first part is a pretty brisk process, and we've operationalized it pretty well, I would say. But then when you start looking at other things, like for example, if I'm a district coming along and I really want to be using Abre for following strategic plan and the execution of the strategic plan, well, that can be variable, right? Sometimes we have customers who have written strategic plans that are well-defined with metrics that are actually captured somewhere and the data is actually valid. And then sometimes we run into customers who have strategic plans that are more inspirational, I would say, and less grounded in actual variables that can measure growth over time, which, that's what we have to look for execution. So then it becomes more of a conversation with leadership to think about, well, how are you thinking about this? And that can sometimes prolong the experience or make it short. Just, these are the things that can be very variable depending on what they're trying to actually accomplish.
There might have to be a data collection time there. If you have a goal that says, hey, improve family communication or improve family happiness or something like that. It's like, okay, well, what's the data point? Do you have that data point? Are we pulling that from the student information system? Do you have another survey tool that you're giving out, like Thought Exchange or something? Like, where's that data coming from? And sometimes, they can even give the survey within Abre if there's a way that they need to collect that data and they're not already doing it. So Zach is 100% right. The basic data integration goes pretty quickly. I'm looking at a client here on my screen that, we're integrating their post-secondary prep information and CCMR outcomes and tutoring information and partnerships. And so those are a longer tail effect around more and more data collected that just makes the system and their users more powerful to their users.
One last question I have about sort of the data insights on this. For districts that have been using the platform for multiple years, have you all observed how districts might start using longitudinal data for students? Because you've described really well how the snapshot in the moment, real-time, fast information is very actionable. Longitudinal data is also really important. Have you seen examples of that?
Yeah, we have lots of examples of this. I'm just going to give you one that I absolutely adore. It's out in Nevada. That's a good example where this particular superintendent, this might be, but basically is trying to correlate and show the effect of long-term subs in the classroom versus teachers who have alternative certification versus who've come up through and tenure, for example. Because his community has asked, hey, over time, are you bringing in more teachers to this community? Are you making this an attractive place to come so that we can better our kids? And then, of course, tying that a little bit to the academic outcomes. This is a skill. You need to learn it. So the more knowledge you have in the background of being an experienced teacher or going through university courses, et cetera. And he has multiple years of data that's displayed. And then, interesting enough, Scott, he made it public. Because you can do this with Abre, you can take that data. We strip out the PII, so we're not pointing fingers at folks, and we're obviously being legal and ethical. But for his community, they have this rolling data point constantly in front of them on their website where they can see in real time this is the impact on what's going, which obviously helps in the narrative of this is how schools are impacting the community, or possibly I have a levy around the corner and I need to be having a narrative of here's all the fantastic things we've been doing this year. In order to keep it up, we need to be doing this, or the narratives that occur as a superintendent or as a district leader or as a board has to do to really support their schools.
Yeah, there's so many longitudinal aspects to this. I mean, there's the academic, there's the special education, compliance, looking at that through things like that lens, or graduation readiness, behavior. Many schools have adopted things like, restorative practices or positive behavior incentive programs. And looking at that, does more time with teachers, teaching and training them and coaching them and teaching them on how to, bring a positive behavior program to their classroom. How has that impacted suspensions or expulsions or negative behavior over time? And I think these things do, but again, that's the thing. I think, right? Until you look at that data, you look at like, okay, we did this or we adopted this program for behavior or attendance. Even looking at things like, high school attendance. Are there students that are tardies? Well, if we have this many tardies, how are we structuring our scheduling and our school day around this? One thing we noticed, and this is a true story working with the district, they were providing a tier 3 intervention program to students who were needing some very strong reading and math intervention. They were offering that intervention program on the day of the week that the students missed the most school. So again, that was an example of, okay, now we're going to look at this longitudinal or this data of attendance over time for this cohort of students, and now we're going to adopt our programs and our strategies around this intervention to match when the students are there, et cetera. And so there's so many aspects of this, and then I love Zach's example of the strategic plan, because that can be very abstract when it's just a PDF, right? Or it's something on the website as a marketing. It's like when you get the community involved of, hey, here's our 5 priorities, academic success, community engagement, whatever it is, and they can start to see the impact that school district is having, or where the community may need to help the school district. That's a really powerful thing, and it gives the community, that appropriate level of transparency into what's going on inside the building.
It's been great getting to meet the two of you, and the platform, sounds awesome. And we'll have a link to the website if people want to follow up and learn more information about it. But before I say goodbye, are there any things that you all wanted to mention that I haven't asked you about?
Chris?
Yeah, I think for me, Scott, I always like to end with this, which is Abre is very much a product that accidentally formed a company. And I think the school districts see this pretty clearly. We didn't set out to build this company. We actually fought it for quite some time. And so we were simply trying to build the best product to help ourselves as an educator in a district. And then we had a growing audience that wanted to use this product. And I think when you start to look at the product through that lens, you start to see we're not making problems out of nowhere to then build a software to solve a non-existent problem. And so I think that at the very DNA of Abre, that approach around Abre is not a company first, it's a product first that built a company, is a differentiator, and I think schools recognize that, and I hope it always stays that way at Abre as we grow, that we're solving real problems for school districts.
Yeah, and I like to, it's funny because you have your hopes and your dreams and your desires as two co-founders and how you start things over time. I think the thing I get most excited about and I bring up is, to support the whole child, you need the whole village. And I really feel like this is something that we do fantastically well as a platform, probably better than anything else out there, where we can connect family members with kids, the tias, the tios, the grandma, the grandpas. Certainly we can connect coaches and mentors to students really easily. And then I get really excited about, we can create the outside community, whether that's, work-based learning partners, you can think of internships and apprenticeships. There are many ways to have success in a student's future, and matching those students up, like we were saying, with the right relationships with folks who can up their opportunities. I'm just really proud that our platform does that exceptionally well, and is more capable of creating an outcome where not only do you have strong students, but you can create a very strong village as well, which is profound.
I love the way that the two of you talk about the fact that you've built this because of your own experiences. And it's not that doesn't happen with other companies, but I think that it's so important, especially in education space where, we're not we're not as educators just given another platform, and have to figure it out and figure out how to integrate it into what's already a busy schedule. I mean, you're really trying to solve those problems for the teachers and the administrators before, they get to that sort of crisis point of having to learn another platform. So I really appreciate that, and the fact that you bring that personal experience into the philosophy of what your company is. So it's been great to get to know the two of you, and if there's a chance to talk about this with some people on the ground, maybe one of your clients, we'd love to be able to do that. So take care of yourselves. So. My guests today have been Zach Vanderveen and Chris Rose. They are the co-founders of Abre. If you want to learn more about that platform, just follow the link in the text accompanying the website. Thanks so much to April Koska and Trinity Sweet for their work behind the scenes on the podcast. If you would like to reach out with ideas, suggestions, or comments, feel free to email us at teachingmatterspodcast@ohio.edu. That's all lowercase, all one word before the @ sign, or of course on social media. Thanks for listening, and we hope everyone has a great day.